Okay, in this video we're going to go through adding layers through Portal. So I'm at the RCView main page here, and I'm just going to click on Map Portal. And then up at the top here I can click Map. And now I get this map of the entire planet. Now yours might not actually look like this. You may have had a map open previously and so it's zoomed in, maybe a layer is added. So you can always just go up to the top here and hit New Map, Create New Map. And it will pop up with probably a little warning. It says, are you sure you want to open this new map? You just click yes, and you'll get this blank map of the entire planet. So this is where you want to be right now. So up at the top, we're going to go to Add, Search for Layers. And so we're searching for layers. We can do it a couple different places. We're going to search for Portal and ArcGIS. That's the software that we're using. So the Red Cross has already added some assets on here, which we'll take a look at. There's data from the National Weather Service, Census Bureau, FEMA. Other sources are in here as well. We could go down to the bottom here and we can actually just search for, if you just made individual content yourself and you just want to search for that, you can do that. If you're in a group, you could search for data that's only in that group because there is a lot of data on here. So you may want to filter it down. But right now we'll just look at Portal for ArcGIS. One really good thing is radar data. There's a lot of good resources here. So I'm searching radar. I'm just going to hit the Nowcast radar. Hit Add. And you can see right away it popped in radar data. So I'm just going to zoom in on the United States here. I'm going to shift click. Zoomed in here. All right. So let's see what else we have. We have radar data. Let's look at shelters. So I just searched for shelters, and this first one here is ARC assets, American Red Cross assets. I'm going to hit that. And what pops up here, these actually aren't shelters. If I do the little pop-up, I'll see that these are actually headquarters that are popping up here. So why did that pop up when I look for shelters? Well, actually, if I start zooming in, shelters do appear. So all these little dots here, these are shelters that are in the NSS system. So if I click in on one, I don't have any attributes for those. We'll take a look at that later though. But you get the idea that as I'm zooming in, these little fine points are disappearing. That's just to help make the map less cluttered. I'm just going to choose one other layer in here. So this one's called West Virginia Shelters. I'm going to click Add. You see that it actually automatically zooms to that part of the country where that layer is specific to. I'm going to hit Done Adding Layers just to talk through a couple points here. So I have these little shelter logos here, which was added in with my last layer here, the West Virginia shelters, and then I have these little dots that are coming from the ARC layer, and there we go. Now we have some pop-up data for these. I'm going to turn off the ARC assets layer here. So now I just have the West Virginia shelters layer and I have the radar data. So a few things to look at here is that we have this custom logo here. And that's something that we'll look at later when we talk about configuring pop-ups. We'll actually look at styling layers as well, so we can have these custom logos here. You'll notice that the logo here, the shelter logo, is above the radar data. So that's actually something that's good. That's what we'd want. We'll come over here to our layer list. And just for some reason, if I wanted to make that radar data above the shelters layer, if I click and drag, I can reorder the layer. But you notice I can't take it all the way to the top. I can put it on top of the Red Cross assets. So if I turn that layer back on, you'll see the radar data covers up the shelters. So I'm going to go back over to my layers and I'm going to move the radar below the Red Cross assets. And now you see those shelters and other points set on top of the radar data. So that's kind of interesting, right? Why can I move one layer but not the other? So back when we were searching for layers, you may notice there's these little icons, and they're different for different types of layers. So some of these have these little, what looks like a little map, and that's called a map image layer. And these other ones, they have this little rectangle, it's called a feature service layer. So those are the two types of layers that we have in the system. So feature service layers, which was what that West Virginia layer were, they're more flexible. I can do custom styling with those. They're a little bit slower with performance. So if I have a lot of feature service layers on the map may run slower, but we can do a lot of powerful styling, which we'll look at towards the end of the lessons. Map services, which were like the radar data and the American Red Cross assets, they have better performance, but you can't do as much work with styling. And if we kind of look at what these layers are, that might make sense. The radar data, I probably wouldn't want to do a custom style on the radar data. It really wouldn't make sense for me to go in and change that. With the Red Cross assets, again, that's kind of a published, centralized database that's out there. I might not want to go in and change the symbology of things. If I'm working on a layer that I'm creating myself, then I kind of want to have more customization on that. And some layers that are published out there are feature services. You can go in and change what's on there. But another thing to remember is that feature service layers are always on top of map service layers. So I can't drag them down. Sometimes that is a source of frustration, but it is how the system is set up. So just know that you can always move map services over other map services if you wanted to, or if you added these layers in backwards and you added the radar just kind of accidentally on top of your Red Cross assets, you could always move those around. Some layers in the map portal come as a map and a feature service, so you can choose which one you want. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go through. All right, so I've created this little map, and I want to go up and save this map just to kind of give you an idea of how saving works. So I have two options here. I have save and save as. At this point, it really doesn't matter which one I choose because this is a new blank map, so I could just hit save. If I was going to make a copy of this map, let's say I made this map and it's perfect and I just want to make a copy of it, or I'm seeing someone else's map and I want to make a copy of their map, and I'll only have save as. So right now it doesn't matter which one we hit. It's going to ask me to name it. So I'm going to name it with my region, 10R28, and I'm going to put layer demo, and then I'm just going to put my last name. So here at the next section, it's going to ask us to add a tag. So a tag is just an easy way that we can search the system later. So right now, I'm going to put training. And if you're taking this before a class, if the instructor gave you a special tag to put in so that way you can see each other's work, add that in here. You always have to have at least one tag, and they want to be descriptive of what the map is. So this one, of course, is a training map. But if I was working on a shelter map, then I would want to add shelters. This has radar. As much information as I can put as a kind of easy, quick search. You want to put that in there. A summary. So we won't get too much into it in these kind of training maps, but just a quick summary of what is actually happening in this map. If I want to save this, I can save it in my training folder. All right, so we save this map. A few other things that I want to go through real quick with layers. Let's just look at this radar layer here. So if I click on it, I actually get a few other sublayers in here. I can add time attributes, things like that. It'll actually have an image that says what time the radar data has come through. So there's other layers beneath this. Same with the Red Cross assets. There's these little sublayers I can go through and look at. So right now I'm just going to click on the NOAA Nowcast radar. And I get these three little dots beneath, which are called more options. So if you click on those, there's a transparency that you can add onto layers as well. So this might be helpful if you do need to see, the names of the counties beneath here. Set visibility range. This is actually what the shelters are using. That's why they kind of disappear at a certain level, those little tiny dots. So you can set a range. So let's take a look at what that would look like. Right now I can see this little black triangle, which is telling me the extent that I'm looking at right now. So if I drag my visibility slider past that, the radar data disappears. And so as I zoom the map in, you notice this little black triangle moves. When I get into my range, the radar data reappears. So that's helpful. I can move the layer up or down, which we could do by dragging and dropping as well. I could rename the layer to something helpful. I could just call this radar if I just want to make it nice and easy for the end user. You'll notice that right now these layers are grayed out. It's because they're not visible. If I zoom in, they become visible. I could remove it, of course. I could hide this in the legend, so let's take a look at that real quick. If I go to the map legend, all of my layers have what the logo means. And then the radar data has 100 or so of these little color icons here, which are probably not useful information. They just kind of clutter. So I can go back in, I can hide that in the legend. I can set the refresh interval, so some of this data that you're adding in updates automatically, some of it does not. The radar data layer actually does update automatically, but if we wanted to just change that, we could say update it every 1 minute. Time animation with the radar data, you can try it. I will say it does degrade the performance of the map to turn that on, but some people do want the moving radar data on their map. Show item details is actually going to give you a description about this layer, what it is. So we can get a lot of information here. We can actually see that the data itself does update every 10 minutes in non-precipitation mode, every 2 to 6 minutes in precipitation mode. It gives you a lot of information about this data, where it comes from. So that's helpful on layers as well. All right, so there we go. We got a little bit of a start here on our first map. So stick around for the next video and we'll do a little bit more.